At one stage in my life, my family and I lived in Orlando for almost 10 years. Honestly, it was a complete blast. I love warm weather, I love sunshine, and so that made it pretty easy to begin with. And despite the crowds and the traffic and the endless sea of tourists, Orlando can actually be a really fun place to live. We had season passes to Universal and Islands of Adventure a couple of years. We had season passes to SeaWorld a few years, and we even got connected to Disney's Extras casting list, so we were able to visit those parks once or twice a year for free, in exchange, of course, for being extras on whatever it was Disney happened to be filming at the time. But it didn't take living in Orlando very long for me to learn something about myself. After about 4 hours in a theme park, I was done. D-O-N-E, done. Hot, tired, sticky, hungry, and overwhelmed by the crowds. All I wanted was to go back home, which annoyed my poor wife and children to no end. Then one day we had a deluxe Disney experience thanks to some very generous friends. We took a leisurely pace. We ate 3 insanely delicious gourmet meals at Disney's best dining experiences. We had snacks and drinks all day long, the works. After 12 hours in the park, I still felt like the day had just begun. I was completely energized. So that experience taught me that eating good would make a difference in my endurance, but I never really understood why until I read the research by Dr. Roy Baumeister, author of the book Willpower. According to Dr. Baumeister, in their early eagerness to chart the brain as the human equivalent of computer chips and circuits, most psychologists had neglected one mundane but very essential part of the machine, the power cord. In a computer, chips and circuit boards are useless without a source of energy, and so is the brain. The energy source for the brain is glucose. For example, a healthy immune system uses a small amount of glucose energy to function normally. But when you're sick, your body uses gobs of that energy. That's why sick people sleep so much and why their brains are always in a fog. Their body uses all the energy derived from glucose to fight that sickness. For the brain to even function correctly, all that thinking requires glucose in the bloodstream. That is, in turn, then converted into neurotransmitters. In both children and adults, research has shown that low self-control is associated with a huge drop in the brain's fuel of glucose. No glucose, no willpower. Let me say that one more time. No glucose, no willpower. It's a pattern that has showed up time and again as researchers have tested more and more people in more and more situations. Researcher Heather Thames even figured out that ego depletion, which I talked about in a previous episode, actually shifts activity from one part of the brain to another. In other words, your brain doesn't stop working when glucose is low. Think of it like an episode of Star Trek or some other sci-fi show. In low-power situations, the person in charge calls for, quote, all available power to be diverted from blah, 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 and into some other more critical area to complete the scene, whether it's life support, thrusters, weapons, whatever. Your brain works the same way in low-power situations. It simply stops doing some things and starts doing others instead. So, in the book Willpower, Dr. Baumeister suggests 5 strategies for putting glucose to work for you. Number 1, feed the beast. In other words, eat good, particularly on days when you're physically or mentally stressed. Do not take on that challenge without glucose. Don't skimp on calories when you're trying to deal with some serious challenge. Number 2, skip the sugar. Sugar may seem like a fast approach to more glucose, but a sugar spike is promptly followed by a crash. Then you're worse off than when you started. Number 3, when you eat, go for the slow burn. The body converts just about all sorts of food into glucose, but at different rates. Foods that are converted quickly have a high glycemic index, producing boom and bust cycles, leaving you short on glucose and short on self-control. For steady self-control, you're much better off eating foods with a low glycemic index. Things like vegetables, raw fruits like apples, blueberries, and pears, cheese, fish, meat, olive oil, etc. Number 4, when you're sick, save your glucose for your immune system. Don't trust a glucose-deprived brain to handle anything important. Number 5, when you're tired, sleep. Adults routinely shortchange themselves on sleep, and the result is less self-control. Research has shown over and over and over that sleep deprivation impairs your ability to effectively process glucose. The next time you find yourself feeling like that old version of me in a hot Florida theme park, D-O-N-E, done, hot, tired, sticky, hungry, overwhelmed, don't risk a crash and burn situation where you might say and or do things you will later regret. Instead, provide your brain with the energy that it needs to continue to function at high levels. If you do this, you'll be much more likely to face that challenge head on and still stick the landing.